Telling your followers you started a live. Excellent. Welcome, everyone. It's Andrew Beach. I'm an executive coach, teacher of self-education. I help professionals like you communicate value to find great opportunities faster. That's through a pragmatic process of branding, planning, and effective networking. If you need help in those areas or to tell a better story about your expertise, I'm the guy for you. So you're welcome to utilize the links that you see on this live stream to put together a application for coaching to see if you qualify. If that's you, great. If not, that's okay too. I'm just here to provide you with some content, some support, some encouragement here today, because today is Friday and it's happy hour. It's 5 o'clock somewhere in Oregon. It's 3 o'clock. Our happy hours start at 3, I think go till 6. So we maybe have different hours for happy hour, but generally speaking, it's 3 to 6. But today's Friday, career happy hour, and we do this every Friday. So if you want to, you're welcome to join, whether that's on YouTube, on Facebook, in my group, on Twitter, or on YouTube, LinkedIn, of course. And then I'm also broadcasting right now on Instagram. So that's something new. I've got five different channels that I'm broadcasting on. So you're welcome to join. You're welcome to ask any questions you want on any of those platforms and to provide me an opportunity to give you some support, because I'm not here for me. I'm here for you. Video is black. Well, that's not good. Let me see what we have over here on our YouTube channel. Looks like I'm live there. Yeah, I see me coming through. So hopefully the video quality will improve as we move on here. If not, let me know and I'll make some adjustments. I do know that my computer is a little bit dated and I apologize for that, but I found out that Restream requires a computer that's been built, say, in the last 4 years. And my computer was built like 10 years ago. So thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. So if you can't see me, I don't know why that is, because I'm also not seeing your image on the chat. So I'm just glad that I'm getting the LinkedIn chats. Last time I didn't get those. So it's good to see everybody. Of course, for Career Happy Hour. That said, a little housekeeping before we commence here today. If you want to, you can click the link in the description and get some free live coaching from me right now. If you want to, it's not required. Or if you don't want to ask your question publicly, you can use the back end of Restream. There's a private chat here. You don't have to put your name in there. When it asks for your name, just put in anonymous and then put in your question in the private chat, and then I'll answer it that way. So that's the first thing to do. But if you want to come on live, you and I can have a dialogue right now in the bar that you see here behind me, and it'll be fun. We'll have a cold drink or hot drink if you prefer, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. What kind of questions would you want to ask? Well, anything really related to topics, especially if you've been here for a while and know what this Career Happy Hour is all about. You can ask about career, about interviewing, about getting promoted, how to negotiate salary, anything of that nature, anything on your mind in the moment. So that's all we're asking for. Anything in the moment. So go ahead and ask your questions. I will go ahead and also really quickly, let me mute this tab because I don't want some loud noises coming across the speakers. Make sure I switch the speakers there too. But I also want to make sure that I get this link into the chat on LinkedIn, because for whatever reason, some things are not coming through. And so just had to refresh. Okay, good. So Restream with LinkedIn, I don't know what's happening, but there's been some hiccups. So I really apologize for that. I don't control Restream, but certainly if you have a question, I'm happy to answer. And certainly one of the things that you can do to help spread the word about this, because this is a platform or a community, this Career Happy Hour, this is an opportunity that if you indeed want to connect with other people, the people that come here, when they put their LinkedIn profile in the chat, and if you want to do that, you can certainly accommodate, whether that's on things like Instagram. I know that Instagram is a, how would you say it? An isolated platform that I'm streaming on from my mobile device. But so you folks on Instagram certainly could get a benefit by interacting with LinkedIn, and I'll share certainly your questions with the broader audience. And you can always watch replays on my Instagram profile or YouTube. Those are probably the easiest ways to find those. But by sharing this out, sharing this broadcast with your network, we get a broader audience, and we get an opportunity to facilitate conversation. And that's really why I do this every Friday. I don't do it for promotion of my business. I don't, even though that's part of it, but I don't do it for that reason. I do it to give back to the community that's helped me, specifically through the LinkedIn platform. And I want you to connect that way. So please send this out to your networks. Let them know that this exists to help people professionally communicate value and find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. So yes, if you can put your LinkedIn profile in the comments box of the platform you're joining from, that's a great way for us to get engaged. And you're welcome to send me a connect request as well, or follow my profile. Sometimes you run out of connect requests, so maybe better to follow my profile than to send me a connect request. But if you feel more comfortable doing that, I have open profile. You can send me a message with your question, and I'll do my best to share that on the next week's career happy hour. Good. So that's the housekeeping. Thank you, by the way. Looks like Scott, you've commanded the chat here. And so Scott has a good question. How do you best balance telling people what they want to hear in the interview and what's real and true for you? I don't see those as two different things. And we'll get into that here today, because that's the topic of the stream today, is getting hired, telling people what they want to hear. And I think there's something to realize there that, yes, I mean, logically speaking, you want to tell people what they want to hear. And I go through these things, but I have some talking points, some notes that I like to stick to, just so we keep on track. But it's a common strategy. A lot of people in the career coaching business tell you, hey, you know what? They have all these requirements. Do your best to meet all the requirements. And I've polled a lot of hiring managers in my day. I've probably presented in a group setting 10,000, maybe more, 20,000 hiring managers. And every time I ask them this very simple question, how often did you hire the person that met 100% of your requirements? How often, as a hiring manager, did you hire a person that met all of your requirements, not just 50% or 60%, 100%? And invariably, every one of them said, never. I've never seen that. I've never done that. I've always hired somebody that did not meet 100% of the requirements. And that relates to a couple of things. First, you don't have to meet 100% of the requirements. I would feel good about that as a candidate. And second, when I come to the interview, my attempt to try to meet 100% of the requirements might actually work against me. And I don't know if there's a balance there, as Scott mentioned, but there certainly is an awareness to be considered. And that is, we need to tell them not so much what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. And wants and needs, two different things. So we'll talk about that. Well, how do I know? How do I know what they need to hear? What they need to hear? And my answer to that is ask. I mean, it sounds so simple. Ask the question. That's what I would do. I would ask them the question. And the challenge that many of us have is asking the right question often is an exercise in refinement, in iteration. Because it used to be, I would ask or encourage people to ask recruiters, hiring managers, whatever that looks like, what are you looking for in the people that you want to hire? You see how general that is? And part of this process of telling people what they need to hear is knowing what they need to hear so that you can align your story with what they need. Does that make sense? What I'm saying here is that if I know what they need, I can give them something that aligns with me. Now, that doesn't mean, nor do I suggest that you inflate your capabilities when you don't have them, nor that you should tell people what they want to hear. Oh, yeah, I've done that before, and here's how I've done it. Because it may be something that you don't enjoy doing. Now, when recruiters come to me, and it happens often, even though I may or may not be looking for what they have to offer, I always tell them who I am first and what I'm good at. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm good at. And the nice thing about doing that up front is it sets a tone and it sets the stage for that conversation. There's nothing more important in an interview, by the way, than to prepare your opener. It's kind of like when I don't know if you've watched late night TV. A lot of the late night TV people, they do a monologue at the front end of their presentation or their show. And believe me, an interview is a show. It's an opportunity for you to perform. Now, interviews are a little bit different than networking in that capacity because it's showtime. This is where the money is made in you getting an offer and you having capacity to negotiate. So let's be clear, there's nothing more important for a candidate in the hiring process than the interview, getting them, performing at them, and getting offers. That's the single most important activity. And part of that is having that icebreaker put together, having a presentation where, hey, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table, kind of like a verbal cover letter, I suppose. And here's what you can expect me to bring. Here's maybe an example of my work, and doing that all inside of a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes max, is a skill. I mean, it's so funny. I was talking to a friend the other day, and they said they're doing a panel interview. There's, I think, on the hiring committee, there's, it's a nonprofit. So this nonprofit on the hiring committee, I think there's 16 people. Some are interacting, others are just taking notes and offering pros and cons. But the idea here is this person came in and they didn't have that figured out. They said, tell us a little bit about yourself. And they went on literally for 15 minutes describing every experience they ever had on their resume. And, people were falling asleep, people were losing track. And by the way, these interviews, because it's a nonprofit and it's in some ways government-based nonprofit, they have 45 minutes to do this interview. Everybody gets fair treatment, etc. And this person droned on for 15 minutes and didn't get all the questions answered that the hiring team intended to provide them. Now, that icebreaker often answers a lot of downstream questions. So in that icebreaker, I advocate you maybe even talk about how you want to grow in your career and that you be comfortable advocating for that and being something to somebody rather than all things to all people. Being something to somebody means you know who you are, you know what you want, you know where you're going, and you have a clear identity when you come into that interaction. And so telling the hiring team that story is going to be like, wow, this sounds a lot different than the other people that I've talked to. And you will stand out that way. So that's something to consider. Let me make sure I'm on track with my notes. And so quality of questions. So that's where we started. This quality of questions was, hey, what is it, what's important in the people that you hire? So general. Okay. And so when I look at that, the quality of the question has to change. And that means, okay, I've read the job description. I've outlined at least, 25 requirements that you have listed here. If you could only pick one, which one do you believe that the candidate absolutely has to have and have in high capacity? What would be the most important of these 25 that you as a recruiter, you as a hiring manager, whoever you're talking to, would tell you this one thing? You have to be able to collaborate cross-functionally with diverse populations and drive change. Great. What if they just admitted to me that that's what's most important to them? That's what they need in the person that comes on board. Now, that may not be what they need. That's what they told you that they need. And your job is to what? Give them what they need so that they can say yes to hiring you. Now, that's not something that's unique to hiring or even interviewing. This is something that salespeople likely are familiar with doing every day of the week. Now, I'm not suggesting you're a salesperson, but truth be told, there's worse things than being a salesperson. I mean, just talk to people, I guess, that work at the IRS. But that said, I'm sure there's plenty of happy people at the IRS. I'm just using that as an example. But the idea here is that if you're advocating for something that's important to you, then you know how to position that advocacy by knowing what they need in the people they hire, and be very specific about that. And so if it's collaborating cross-functionally with diverse populations to accelerate or in some way drive change in an organization, then certainly your examples and your stories should revolve around that. Now, many of us haven't taken the time to actually do that exercise of creating stories. And hopefully, Scott, that's answered your question about balancing what they want to hear and what's real and true about you. Because here's the challenge, and I think it's valid, that many of us have when we get into an interview situation, and that is there's a job on the line here, and we feel that tug, that anxiety that, hey, I have to perform well here for this hiring team so that I can at least be in consideration, get to the next interview, or get an offer. And so I'm in some ways maybe diminishing what it is that I'm good at, or maybe showcasing things that I don't like doing. The example I use a lot is, I know how to use Microsoft Excel, and I could probably run analysis through Microsoft Excel, but am I excited? Am I energized? Do I love hanging out with Microsoft Excel every day? And the answer is no. So if there's three ingredients that you can identify that drive what you do, and certainly that's for me, learning. I love learning. I love consuming information. I mean, that's what I do almost every day. Is I try to keep in touch with what's happening in the market. I try to interact with people on social. I look at news stories, right? This is something that I do every day so that I can be a better coach for the people that I'm interacting with. So I can be a better leader in my community so that I can offer value to others. That's not something that's about me. It's about other people. And so learning, teaching is kind of two sides of the same coin, to be honest. Learning and teaching are really interrelated. And I think it's important the way that I actually activate my learning is by teaching it to others. And that's where I feel I'm uniquely qualified to provide support to people, whether they're leaders looking to get to the C-suite, or they're frontline workers that are looking to get into management, or if you're a technical person that wants to become a software engineering manager, for example, or a director of architecture, right? There's a series of things that you need to recognize when you're putting together some of these thoughts and ideas, is that you need to become the person that you want to be. And sometimes that's a lesson in perception. Perception is, hey, if my resume says I'm a software developer, then I'm not positioning myself as a software development manager or leader or director of architecture. Makes sense? So what we're talking about here is a capacity to tell really compelling stories at an interview, through our professional relationships, through our networking, to people, not just, I think I talked about this last week, or maybe even on some of my my Instagram stories, and that is this concept of storytelling in a way that people can understand at a 10-year-old level. Because often we get really wound up. That people need to know that we have broad vocabulary, that we're, by being more astute in our presentation and using big fancy words, that we actually are a better candidate for that organization. Now, or for anybody. that we're a great candidate. We can get hired in that capacity. And, when I look at it, if I can explain this to a 10-year-old, I can easily extrapolate that to CEO, right? I can start, if it's a peer in my industry, I can start inserting technical language or some examples that relate more to what we're talking about. But if I can describe that to a 10-year-old, I've covered every base that I'll ever encounter. And now I have a diversity of presentations of my brand that people can lean into and understand. If that is something that you struggle with, because I know I did for the longest time, that I struggled with this concept of being able to tell my story and not feel like I was bragging or arrogant about it, that it was natural and authentic for me to deliver, that it wasn't like putting on a different set of clothes than I normally wear. It's like when I tried on some skinny jeans once, and I was like, these things just don't fit right. They don't fit me right. They're not the comfortable type of, stretchy baggy jeans that I'm used to wearing. And that was a different kind of thing for me to be engaged in. And it took some getting used to, maybe. But the idea of getting support that way isn't unique. Many people have a challenge talking about themselves. And part of that is just sharing the truth. And identifying your stories is something that takes some effort. And it's not something that's done overnight. So if you had, let's say you had an interview on Monday, I would, and you wanted to come ask me for support, I might actually try to talk you out of that support. Not that I would not support you. It's that I would try to talk you out of that support for a number of reasons. That if you hadn't developed some stories, that you don't have relationships in that hiring team, then your performance is going to require more time investment than you have between now and Monday. That's just a fact. Because if you don't have the internal champion, someone on the inside, and you don't have the content put together on how you come to this role and the examples you would use, you wouldn't have time enough to practice for that opportunity. And yes, many of the people that I've coached, especially at places like Amazon, AWS, 25, 30 hours of practicing their star stories, practicing their icebreaker, their elevator pitch, whatever you want to call that front end expression. It's a lot of investment of time. And I would certainly encourage you, if you have interest in that, that's a separate service that I provide. It's called an interview preparation intensive. It's 90 minutes, building a strategy, practicing, talking about how to approach this interview, how to position yourself. It's a comprehensive 90-minute session. And it includes review of your resume and building of a strategy and the social profiles of all the people you'll be interviewing with, so that you don't have to be seen as looking at those profiles. So I'm happy to take that burden off of your shoulders if that's something that you're being challenged by. And it's not uncommon that people would be challenged by that. Good. Looks like Scott has another question here, or observation maybe. Being objective is the hard part. Well, I don't know if you have to be objective. We could certainly talk about that. Confidence is rewarded, arrogance is punished. I would agree with that statement partially, because often confidence can come off as arrogance. And there is a difference. And you really have to pay attention to how people respond to how you're presenting yourself to know which is the difference, because it's not about you. Your expression of what you believe to be confidence can be perceived by someone else as arrogance. So we can certainly talk around that if you have some questions. Perceptions can be hard. Yeah, they're always hard. The funny thing is, I was starting to think about this in terms of career and in terms of how companies treat their employees or individuals and leaders treat their people, the people that report to them, the people they serve. And that everything in business seems to be, this up and to the right kind of mentality, that everything should be rosy and everything should be positive, and that, bottom left to top right, everything's on an upward trajectory. It's just not like that. In business, in life, the way we treat people, the economics of everything, they're up and down. That's just reality. And if we're working in a framework where it's up and to the right, And yet we're living in a reality that's up and down. That's where you hear leaders that are moderately tone deaf, and they don't know what's happening because they aren't paying attention to the fact that things go up and down, even though they perceive or want them to be up and to the right. Let's see. I think in the past I focused on watching nonverbals for feedback instead of just being. Yeah, I mean, so the challenge we have, especially in a remote situation like we are, where a lot of the interviews are on Zoom or some other tool, or maybe even recorded, is we don't have an opportunity to look at our nonverbals unless we've recorded ourselves doing that activity. So for me, it's difficult because often we're more focused on our delivery than we are on the other person. And when you're delivering virtually like this, you're always looking in a camera. And it's difficult to look at the camera and then look down at the screen and see how that person responds during your presentation. The only way you could solve that is you can actually set up a teleprompter. And the nice thing about the teleprompter is it sits behind the camera, and you can have the screen that you're supposed to be looking at behind the camera. And so, yes, you would always be looking into the camera, but you'd also be seeing their response at the same time. But those setups are like $1,100, $1,200, $1,500 for a very simple one, and the more expensive ones are in the thousands of dollars. So I don't suspect that any of us are going to be doing that just to do an interview. But the idea is you do your best with what you've got, and if you can record and watch it back, or if you can do a mock session or a pre-prep with a coach, then you can certainly record that session and see how you respond and get some feedback directly from the coach that you're interacting with. So hopefully that's answered your questions. And so, what you've pointed out, though, which is perfectly valid, Scott, is that, often when you come to these situations and you're presenting, you're focused on what you're saying. You're not focused on how they're responding to what you're saying, which means you haven't really internalized your presentation. I'm not saying you memorize your scripts, but certainly memorizing your answers is a good step towards being able to focus on your delivery rather than the words coming out the mouth, and then in turn actually focusing on how those people are responding to what you're saying. Good. So thank you for that question. If there's any other questions, by all means, put those in the comments box. If you have it, I'm happy to answer. Good. Looks like we have a couple people on Instagram. Hi, Instagram. Just saying hi to my friends on Instagram. Good. So put those questions in the chat box. Nothing much else that I wanted to share today. We typically go, 20 to 40 minutes every Friday. If there's nobody here and there's no questions, then we just sign off early, and I wish you a great weekend. Many of you, at least in Canada and the United States, have holiday weekend, a long weekend. So have a great weekend. Take some time off to recharge your batteries, or maybe charge up by learning something new, a new skill, sharpening the saw. Maybe just nothing. Sometimes just disconnecting from the technology is really helpful. At least I've found it that way. Good. All right, folks. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday for Career Happy Hour. I'm still working to get with Terry Smith so that we can have kind of an update on the state of hiring. Terry provides a volume of expertise on talent acquisition side, so I'm really interested to get his perspective on what we're seeing in 2022. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? What does that look like? What are leaders talking about? And really get some input that way. That's something, by the way, is going to be challenging for our friends on Instagram, because Terry typically joins by Restream. So if you are typically joining by Instagram, you might want to consider, since we're having a guest, accessing the stream from another platform. And you're welcome to look me up. I have pretty much the same handle on all the social networks, and that's at Branding Dynamo. All right, folks, take care. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Career Happy Hour.